All right, I'll call to order this meeting of the Joint Conceptual Workshop for Board of Mayor and Aldermen and Franklin Municipal Planning Commission for April the 24th, 2025. Our first item on the agenda, item number 1. Let me start with a call to order. Commissioner Harrison.
Present.
Commissioner Lindsay's present. Commissioner Orr.
Present.
Commissioner Mann.
Present.
Commissioner McLemore.
Present.
Commissioner Williamson.
Present.
And Alderman Peterson.
Here.
And Mayor Moore is not. Alderman Baggett,
Present.
you have a lot of responsibility tonight.
Uh-oh.
No, with Alderman Peterson. Okay. Okay, so that's roll call. Item number 1 is the zoning ordinance update. Potential topic is halo signs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There are 2 topics on the agenda tonight, both related to the zoning ordinance update. And the first one is halo signs, which was brought forward last year for some discussion, and staff is bringing that back for additional discussion this year. And then following that is the cumulative time frame for substantial improvement and substantial damage. So Joel will kick off the halo signage, and then Shanna will handle the floodplain one.
Okay, Joe?
Perfect. Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Planning Commission and Aldermen. So as Kelly said, this first topic that we're going to be talking about is potential zoning ordinance update for you all is going to be regarding halo lighting. So just as a quick reminder, this topic came before you all last year for some initial discussion after there was an application of a business trying to apply for this type of signage, and ultimately it was not approved, had to go through the correct procedure to go get a rezoning to allow for this, to allow for that type of signage. So this was something new in the city of Franklin, quite frankly, in a lot of different communities. And so that necessitated some further discussion to see, understanding how other peer communities regulate halo lighting, halo lit signage, and to also see how we could potentially integrate this into the zoning ordinance. So staff did do some additional research, compile that information for you all to, again, discuss those potential updates. So just as a quick refresher, halo lighting is described as a source of illumination not directly visible, lighting only the background upon which the individual letter is mounted. So as you saw with these previous images, it is again lighting the background of the sign of the letter for which is mounted. This is different from externally illuminated signs because, as you all have seen in the city of Franklin and other communities, externally lit signage is the light pointing towards the sign. It's directing the light to the signage, to the letters, whatever it is. Internally lit signage is lighting that is coming through the letters, coming through the sign. Halo lighting is different because it's indirect. It's only lighting the background upon which the letters are mounted. So this is something that our current zoning ordinance regulations do not really allow for that. We have internal illumination and external illumination. And so really the only way for a property owner to really allow for this right now is to get a rezoning, go through the process, have a public hearing for it and everything, request to get an approval of the MOS to allow for that. So there is steps that are required for that. It's just a little bit longer. And again, this is something new. This is something that other communities are starting to address, and this is something that a lot of newer developments are starting to incorporate. And so staff wanted to see how other communities define that and permit halo lighting. We looked at other communities like Gilbert, Arizona, Chattanooga, Tennessee, a community that just updated their signage ordinance to address halo lighting and other types of new signage types, Henderson, Nevada, and then also other historical communities, Plymouth, Massachusetts, for example, who have also done work to address halo lighting and halo lit signage. So after doing research of our potential, of other communities and other peer communities in Tennessee, our potential zoning ordinance amendments that we wanted to bring for you all for review and consideration to get your direction on are the following, as you can see here on the screen. They are to really define halo lighting. Again, what is halo lit signage? What is halo lighting? Provide additional clarity on external, internal, and indirect illumination standards. Because again, as I said, halo lit signage is different. It's indirect illumination. So we would need to understand if we're going to permit it, what are the illumination standards that may need to be incorporated for halo lit signage. And then also identify areas where halo lit signs may or may not be appropriate. As of right now, our current zoning ordinance regulations in the sign ordinance chapter talks about, right now, certain sign types are permitted based on specific zoning districts. So we would need to determine, based on if halo lighting is to be permitted, which zoning districts should be, where should these be permissible? Where would these be appropriate? And especially if these are going to be indirectly illuminated, how do we account for any potential impact? So that's something that we would research and draft further if that's the direction. These are, again, just kind of what we've compiled. We will be happy to do any additional research, but this is kind of what we wanted to bring you all today for our joint conceptual workshop regarding halo lit signage. I'm available for any questions.
Okay. Commissioner?
Do any of the other ones, any of the ordinance that you've seen, do they address the color? With all of the LED lighting now, it's so easy to change the color. Do they take a position on that? Or the softness?
Mm-hmm. So they don't necessarily, I haven't seen color really be addressed. It's more about the illumination. They want to look at the luminaries, the watts and everything, really the impact of the light, the impact of the glare. But it's more with neon that I've seen more kind of addressing color, especially something like that, but more it's about the softness, the intensity of the light and how it's being impacting to residential properties or, glare on the streets.
I would just have one kind of comment just about, it has to do with the lighting in general. I think, a lot of the images we've seen and kind of the example that came in for that zoning allowance, it was kind of a white light, looked classy, looked good. My only comment, and this is more of like a personal thing, is like blue lights, especially for signage. Our eyes can't focus on blue. So if you all are driving home tonight, if you see a blue sign, try to read it. You barely can read it. And then the glare on that is it's very difficult to look at a blue light. You can't focus on it. It gets blurry. And I could see that if you had kind of that, which is kind of a glare issue, even though it might not be like obtrusive, it might not be overly bright, it's just the color has to do with humans, how our eyes work. I could see that in certain cases could be a little bit of a nuisance if people are kind of seeing this blue thing. That would be my only comment of like a light color that could be potentially problematic. But I think kind of most colors, I'd be a little curious about that if, limitations, but I don't think we really are.
Okay.
Okay. Commissioner Orr?
Can you go back to the very first slide?
Yes.
Just looking at those examples, the Versace seems acceptable. It's not obtrusive. The low is kind of on the verge of the lights behind each letter merging in with each other. And then the bottom one, to me, that's too much. Too much light. You don't need that much light to illuminate the letter. So if we're going to look at what would be acceptable and what would be over the top, the one in the middle seems appropriate.
Yeah. That's something definitely we can take into account for, as other communities do have some specific type of light or wattage associated with that.
Keep it with soft white or white and don't allow any additional coloring.
We can explore that further.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because it seems like neon could be used, but an LED fixture would be kind of infinitely adjustable in terms of intensity or even color, which we may decide we don't want color. But is there among the cities that are using it, or is there a tendency toward one versus another, or?
In the peer communities that we've done, we looked at a number of them. There were some references to white, but nothing really talking about, and we can explore this further if that's the commission asking questions about that. We can explore that in those communities further to see if color is actually being addressed or not. But we're not seeing that really. It's just talking about white and the intensity of it. Really, it's going back to if these are going to be indirectly lit, what is its impact? What is the glare? And is there mitigation to that? What are the lighting levels? Is it going the photometrics they have to submit for that? Is it going beyond the property line? Is it impacting the glare on the streets? And so, but that is something I think we could bring back to you all when we're drafting this language further.
Okay. Other comments?
The bottom one is a little bit much. It's pretty bright, but I could live, I mean, I like number 2. I could live with the top one as well. But, and number 2 is very soft, but the third one is bright.
Yeah.
And I think too, especially on the white lights, you know, some of the white lights, they have a lot of blue in them. And so if you're looking at these, if you look at the Versace one, it's, you know, more of a golden color light. It's probably like a 27K or so. And then you look at the others and, you know, they're daylight. They're really bright. Lots of blue.
Yeah. Alderman Peterson or Baggett? Okay. Is that it? Okay. Thank you, Joel.
Thank you.
Good presentation. Okay, item number 2 is the zoning ordinance update, potential topic, cumulative time frame in the floodplain. Shanna?
Sorry, Shannon.
Oh, no problem.
Okay. Good evening. When I presented this before to BOMA work session, we had to zip through this really fast because we were out of time. But this, of course, is the first time before the Planning Commission. So I'm going to go a little slower this time and welcome any discussions and questions. So what we're looking at and wanting feedback on is for substantial improvement and substantial damage in the floodplain. Why do we regulate the floodplain? And I'm not going to go through all of these, but just hit a couple of the high points. Reasons for regulation is to protect human life, health, safety, and property. Minimize expenditure of public funds for costly flood control projects. Minimize the need for rescue and relief efforts associated with flooding. And I think we've all witnessed this past year through TV the amounts of floods that are happening. Just a few statistics. The state of Tennessee has had 19 flood-related presidential disaster declarations. Since 2022, Tennessee alone has had 17,088 claims. Now, that does not count the flooding that took place with Hurricane Helene in East Tennessee and the more recent flooding in Springfield, or in Clarksville, a couple of months ago. William and I were actually at a training event yesterday and got an update that the NFIP is currently $39 billion in debt due to all the flooding and insurance claims. So NFIP regulations through the Code of Federal Regulations requires that permits for all proposed construction and other development be permitted. Doesn't necessarily require a building permit, but it requires a floodplain development permit. And development is a very, very broad definition. It covers basically everything down to painting. The city of Franklin is in the community rating system. The community rating system, it's a voluntary program for communities that have adopted higher standards than FEMA's minimum standards. And it's an incentive program to allow insurance discounts for citizens and business owners within the community. Right now, there are 12 communities in the state of Tennessee that are in the community rating system. Knoxville is a level 6, and with the community rating system, the lower the number, the better the level. So Knoxville is the best in Tennessee right now. 9 more are at an 8 and 2 are at a 9. City of Franklin and Williamson County are both rated as a Class 8. So one of the things that the city is receiving credit for through the community rating system is for our cumulative tracking of substantial damage and substantial improvement. Currently, we are monitoring for a 5-year period for substantial damage and improvement. And if any point over that 5-year period, 50% of the structure's value is met with improvement or damage repairs, then the entire structure has to be brought into compliance with current standards. Again, I mentioned we are a Class 8 community in the CRS program, which allows our citizens and property business owners a 10% discount on their insurance premiums. We currently have 1,334 points, and there's lots of different ways that you can get points. Some things cost money, be actions that, board would have to vote on to do. Other things are low-hanging fruits that we can probably grab a few more points on. Again, 5-year current cumulative time frame. The minimum is 1 year, and so that's what we've been asked to bring forward to discuss to see if there is interest in changing from the 5-year to 1 year. We would lose 90 points in our CRS program, but we would still have enough points to remain a Class 8 and not lose any discounts. It is important to note that over the past 3 years that this has been in effect, we've not had anyone trigger substantial improvement or substantial damage due to the cumulative time frame. We have had several homes being brought into compliance, but those have been either due to fire with total demolition of a home, and several homes that are being elevated with the Army Corps of Engineers grant. So what would be some of the benefits to reducing that time frame back to 1 year? It would make home improvements and renovations easier on citizens and business owners. It would make tracking easier and less burdensome for staff. And again, we wouldn't lose enough points to lose our Class 8 status. Some of the drawbacks, projects may drag on longer. We have less compliant structures in the floodplain, potentially increasing the number of emergency rescues during a flood event, and a loss of some points. And with that, open to any questions.
All right.
Can you go back to that last
Commissioner
slide?
Mann.
Thank you. I just want to read it. I'm just reading.
Okay, so since that slide is up there, the second bullet, under the second bullet, when you're calculating substantial damage or substantial improvement, you don't count the cost of the land, only the cost of the structure. So, so you may have like an average home price. I'm not sure what an average empty lot would cost.
Right.
But that would be deducted from the almost $900,000 that the whole house and parcel is located on.
Yes, and we currently, figure that in one of two ways. We either go by the county property assessor
Yep.
and add 15%, or we allow for an independent appraisal.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions?
I will make a comment.
Sure.
So one of the reasons this is coming up is I had a property owner down in Ward 4 in one of the floodplains called me, and he was doing some other improvements. His parcel, commercial property, was valued at $74,000. The tax assessors. It's a commercial building, way undervalued, right? So take us back 5 years before we changed it to allow the appraiser. This is kind of why I got into part of city government. It was because me and my neighbors started in on some of this because we live in the floodplain too. And at that time, we went through a good dialogue with Vernon and staff and everybody, and there were a couple of changes we made, which went from 10 years to 5 years, and then adding this appraisal, which at the time it took a while for us to get even there. But in that case, this guy, well, there's a lot of backstory to this one, but $30,000 before we made a tweak to the floodplain ordinance. Just a little tweak. We're not changing anything major. We allowed the appraisal. And now he can go get appraisal, and actually $30,000 on a commercial building, you can't paint it. You can't do really, that's not much at all. So we made that little tweak, which made the possibility of that dilapidated, or I shouldn't say dilapidated, but unoccupied for a long period of time building, there's a chance that it might become occupied now. So the thing is that you have now that's over 5 years. So there's really no chance on a building like that, some of the other buildings in our floodplain, to have those, to really to improve their property in such a way that it's anybody would want to do that or to visit it. I mean, you think about it. If it's $400,000 structure, they can spend $200,000. You can get it kind of up to date, but you got a 5-year horizon, and so if there's a fire or something happens, then you got to raise the whole building up. Well, that, as you know, or maybe you don't know, we're doing the Army Corps of Engineers thing. The neighbor to my rear had their 1,800 square foot, 2,000 somewhere in there. It was $450,000 to raise their, and y'all probably seen bigger numbers than that on some of the bids for the other houses. For a 2,000 square foot residential house. Now they got how much from the federal government and the city? I think they were in the
65 and 65-35, with the property owners paying half of the 35. And the city
so
covering the other
really,
half.
about 15% they were responsible. Now, how many have taken it of the 30 houses?
I think we've got maybe 6 or 7 under
6 or 7 maybe
under construction.
of the 35. So here's what you got. We've got a rule that if it's tripped, it's a $500,000 situation, and even the residents that are getting 70%, or you do the math, 75%, whatever it is, 78%, whatever. Even the people of the 35 houses that could have gotten 78% or whatever it is, covered by government funds, they chose not to do it, largely probably because of the cost. Maybe the impact to their house, maybe the impact to their way of living, whatever. But so then you've got all these commercial properties, though, and residential properties that are in the floodplain that were not the regularly affected, and we and this building owner in particular, and the other, hundreds probably of people that live in the floodplain, we're not turning in. Now I'm painting my house today. I have a floodplain permit for that paint going in my house because I'm not going to do something. I'm going to do it. But you got no one voluntarily doing this. You say that nothing has been triggered. It's because they're not turning it in. You've got an ineffective ordinance, which is effectively, it's an ineffective ordinance. No one's turning in painting their house to do this. No one's turning in when they put in new light fixtures, which, by the way, is on my floodplain ordinance because it's by the letter of the law. putting new light fixtures in, so it's going towards my cumulative. If I wanted to put siding on my house, or if this building owner wanted to put a new roof on his building, it's a $300,000. He can't put a new roof on. If his property's worth $400,000 and it's a $250,000 roof, he can't put a new roof on because it would go over the 50%. He has to raise it. So how do we address this? We talked about exempting maintenance. Like, what we don't want is houses getting bigger or buildings getting bigger and furthering that non-compliance. But we also don't want like continued deferred maintenance because of the fear of going over the 50. I really appreciate staff coming up with this. Maybe this will actually get more people if we do some more education, and I would be wholeheartedly, I'll bang the drum. Let's educate people. You need to turn it in, and every year it resets, but we need to be tracking this. And we'll have better, I guarantee we'll have better information as a staff. We'll be able to inform them better. I think we just budgeted some more money for floodplain communication, I believe. I don't know if it's in the budget, I believe. Maybe $10,000, I believe was that something like that we haven't done in the past? Let's do that. Let's do more of that. But what you have is an ordinance that really is, it's causing the Fifth Avenue buildings. Now there are ways to get out of it. You go through historic zoning. It's just inefficient, and it encumbers those buildings to never be improved in the future because they've been deemed historic. Now now you're just going to have buildings that have been improved that are going to continue to flood. So I think this is a great way to come in the middle ground. Allows people to maintain their house without fear of a $500,000 expense. These houses in Ewingville, and I live on the other side of it, this is a lot of money for people, and they're worried about trees falling and hitting their house, and then having all this, and then you get in and staff finds that, or inspectors find that there's been improvements that have been made, and then all of a sudden, I mean, it's a big deal. So I would say this is another little tweak like the appraisal, which is a small tweak, but I think it'll help. And if we educate and get the message out, I think we'll actually improve compliance. And I'd say staff, go find some more things that we can do, that help us get more flood resilient houses built. Because how many have voluntarily been raised without a program, without a new construction, without a fire? How many have we had that have triggered this? Probably.
There's maybe 4 on Old Liberty that were done voluntarily.
Old Liberty, but that was new construction.
It was new construction.
New construction. So
They demolished and rebuilt.
demolished and built up. Okay, but it's still new construction. So again, I don't know of one situation of an existing home that has been raised just voluntarily. I mean, it's not happening. We're really talking about a mythical situation here because no one's turning stuff in. And they're tearing it down. If there is a substantial damage, they're tearing it down and building a building up, and it's in compliance. So we have these rules that are really deterring people and business owners from maintaining their properties for a situation that just hasn't ever happened. It hasn't. And if it does, if you find one, it will be less than 5, for sure. So it's just common sense. And I have a whole email list of, of people who live in the floodplain that would appreciate this, and a whole list of business owners that would appreciate this. And so those are my comments. It's my wife's birthday, but I came here just because.
We appreciate it. I
of this.
appreciate your comments,
Yeah.
but I want to make sure that we understand that the objective of this process, declaration of substantial improvement for improvements to a house, or declaration of substantial damage for damages caused to a house, either by flooding or by fire or tornado or whatever. The intent of that process is to create compliant structures. So if you're using this change to the ordinance to try to keep people from being declared substantially damaged, then you're really kind of defeating the purpose of the program. And you're also really creating issues for that homeowner that, a homeowner that's flooded 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, eventually will get tired of cleaning out what may be only a 6-inch flood of water in the house. They will sell that house probably to an investor. It may never go on the active market, but somebody's grandmother from California is going to move here and pay $1 million for that structure, and it's going to be a non-compliant structure. And that's the reason we look at this from the perspective of a cumulative, a year, or 5 years, or 10 years. My ordinance in Nashville is 10 years, and I've got 45 council members, and none of them are coming to me saying, let's change our 10-year cumulative period. Probably the bulk of the communities in the United States, which I think is over 20,000, all have longer cumulative periods. Because if you have a series of smaller floods over a period of time, if a structure continues over and over to get flooded, it just needs to be brought into compliance. And that may be elevating it 2 or 3 feet or as much as 6 or 8 feet. It may mean installing flood vents. It may be restoring damage with flood-resistant materials. All of those are things that tie into the compliance with floodplain ordinance, with the Federal Register or whatever. But that's the thing you have to be careful about, is that you don't use this because in 2010 we had 10,000 structures in Nashville flood, and you would be astounded at the number of people that walked in with only 49% damage. And they were using what they could use. The transition to using a certified appraisals number was a good addition to your regulations, because a lot of times the tax assessors, the assessed value may be low, and if you can get a professional appraiser to come in and appraise it for $200,000 more, you've just freed up $100,000 worth of additional work you can do without having to meet substantial damage requirements. So you want to make sure that it's not used as a tool to prevent bringing a structure into compliance, because you will end up with a phrase that I began to use after 2010 was that you're going to end up with subsequent victims. You're going to end up with new people move to town, don't know what the flood looked like, don't know how high the water was in their house, and they think they got a great buy on a great new house that's a non-compliant, flood-prone structure. So that's another thing you have to just be really careful about, is that you don't use it to avoid meeting the requirements. Commissioner Mann?
Is there any risk to the city in that scenario that you just described? I guess I'm kind of viewing it from the lens of somebody's knowingly putting more money into the house. That's kind of their prerogative to say, look, my house just flooded. It's worth $400,000. I want to put $400,000 right back into it. I don't know if I would do it, but that's their prerogative. And then they sell it. Next person has the opportunity to do their own diligence. A little bit of is kind of the free market of that. Is there a harm to the city other than potentially upset residents saying,
Yeah.
how did this happen? But would we eventually have to buy that back? Like, what's the risk there?
There would not be an outright harm to the city. You wouldn't allow somebody to do $400,000 worth of improvements to a $400,000 house, because then you're at full 100% of the value.
Right.
But you would have to do all the improvements. You have to bring the entire house into compliance with the floodplain ordinance. Now, the thing where it could run into some problems is if you had a $400,000 house and somebody got a foot of water in the house and they wanted to repair it and remodel their kitchen. So maybe they come in with, again, the example I used a minute ago, 49% damage. I can fix my house and I can do the work on my kitchen and not exceed 49%. Okay, so next year it's not a $400,000 house anymore. Maybe it's close to a $600,000 house. And with only a 1-year cumulative period, if they have an accident, if they have a flood, a minor flood, a major flood, they are still, their substantial damage now is not 200,000, half of it, but now it's 300,000. So now it's a $600,000 house, and they can do $300,000 worth of upgrades to it, new roofs, new master suites, whatever. And so now, next year, it's a $900,000 house, and it's still non-compliant. It's still below the the base flood elevation. But by complying with this 49%, substantial damage number, eventually the value of the house continues to rise. It attracts perhaps more well-heeled buyers, and it's still non-compliant, and you're still going to end up with an unhappy purchaser down the road because, gee, I never knew that this house was in the floodplain. It's astounding how many people I talk to that after the fact, and I tell, my job is to talk to people that, is this house in the floodplain? I talk to real estate agents. And so people just don't use the resources that are available to them. A simple phone call to you, Shanna, would answer 1,000 questions for a
I know
person.
you're not surprised at how often it happens,
Right.
but you would be
So,
surprised.
that is all, there's nothing incorrect about what you said. It's just that it hasn't happened with the 5-year. It didn't happen with the 10-year. No one raised their house, even with a 10-year accumulation, other than new construction or this government or the government program. So we're talking about and I understand the logic is right, but it's just not happening because we have an ordinance that is not actually working because people aren't turning things in. They're just not. So what you're saying, and I say this respectfully, but what you're saying, the worst case scenario or the ill effects of what this 1-year change might do is actually already happening right now. People are doing that now. They're putting in kitchens, they're painting their walls, they're putting in light fixtures, and they're putting on roofs, and we're not calculating it. And that's happening every single year, all the time. It's not happening. The case proven by the fact that there have been no houses raised because it's triggered this based off of the fear of or based off of renovations and people improving their properties. Yeah. It's not happening. Maybe it is in Nashville, and you got hundreds of thousands of more people are there.
It's difficult.
It's not
difficult
happening
to enforce.
Right,
sometimes we only know
we've got
because
an
there's a dumpster parked in the front yard.
So here's where it gets the building owners and the people who live in the floodplain that actually are trying to obey the law are the ones being penalized. This constituent who comes to me and wants to follow the rules, he could have just painted the building. Probably wouldn't have gotten caught. But what this does is, in effect, the people who disregard our ordinances are putting in new kitchens, and they're improving their house. They're replacing their siding without a permit. They're doing all of these things
That's
already.
not a floodplain issue.
It is.
That's not.
It's not a floodplain, but it's happening.
Permits and.
So are you saying we should just continue? An ordinance that is not being enforced is a bad ordinance then? It's not effective. So the 1 year will allow people to maintain their properties. It will allow people to maintain their properties without the fear of a $500,000. Maybe you can afford. Maybe all of you can afford raising your house or raising your commercial property. No telling $1 million or plus it would cost to raise that commercial property if it gets struck by lightning. Now, there's insurance you can buy for all this. To your point, none of this is, in my opinion, you can buy insurance for this. I know, and it goes higher than $250,000, so the slide needs to be corrected. You can I got buildings insured in downtown Franklin in the floodway for $5, $6, $7 million.
That's with a private
flood,
coverage.
excess private.
Yeah,
It is
your flood's
possible.
still probably okay.
So
Because
the
the FEMA insurance is $250. So.
Yeah, the FEMA is.
Yeah.
So again, it comes back to an individual choice here, and we got something that's happening now, or we got people, my neighbors, business owners downtown, get stuck in a hard place because of this, the 5-year cumulative. This was a staff-driven actually solution. I didn't come up with this. I brought up the issue. Staff came up with this as a good medium, possibly to allow people to, maybe as an incentive to, and I'd be okay doing this and then saying if we go to a 1 year, but if you have lower thresholds of doing, we should require them to put flood vents in more frequently, or we should require people to raise their HVAC unit before you hit the 50%. What you have right now is a system where everyone is remaining in noncompliance. 2 houses down from me, they waited 5 years to improve their house, and then they sold it to someone from Alabama. But nonetheless, it's so people are getting around it anyway. Why don't we have an ordinance that actually encourages people to build more flood resilient or renovate and improve their house and make them more flood resilient? Because the status quo is that they just do it and we don't get more flood resilient structures unless there's a fire or unless it's a new construction. And that was the whole point of this, was to let's do some tweaks that might actually lead to more houses becoming more compliant, rather than citizens and business owners dancing around this 50% to see how we can stay at 49%.
Yeah.
I'd even say, like, let's do something at 25%. I don't even know if this is possible, Roger, but
Yeah.
we could say that if you spend 25% of the value of the structure, then we want you to elevate your HVAC units. We want you to put in flood vents. I love that. Like, it's both and. I think that is very,
Because
something we should look at.
there are 1,800 houses in Franklin that are in the floodplain. So
And zero have been raised
to
because
encourage
of this.
to encourage
Zero have been.
a homeowner to improve
Not
the
because of this.
resilience of his home, to install flood vents. His flood insurance will drop if he installs flood vents, because it becomes a more
Exactly.
compliant structure.
I love the. I
Those are
think we
great
should work towards
things
that.
to do.
I'm
You know-
and against the opinions of
Yeah.
some people I'm close with in the floodplain, my next door neighbor, but like, I think we should add more teeth at a lower level, because right now we're getting nothing.
Okay.
Thank you for the
You know,
dialogue.
and then the extreme end of it is to buy and demolish.
That's right.
And in Nashville, we've bought 470 houses now. And
I don't think we're going there here,
Understand.
and I don't think we want to go there here.
yeah, and a lot of cities don't want to take that hit on their tax base either.
Right.
So,
But I do think we can do more things. So last thing is staff, I would love to continue looking at this. There was zero opposition to this at BOMA that I heard of. And BOMA, I believe, is in charge of the zoning ordinance, right? We get to vote on the zoning ordinance. So I'd like staff to come up with some of those other things where at 25%, we might add flood vents, or we might add, don't just do this. We need to do more. We can have to do some more. I mean, the commercial property owner should have to raise all of his HVAC stuff, even in this situation. You shouldn't be able to have to, we shouldn't wait till 50% to do some of those minor things that will actually make it more resilient, and stop having people tiptoe around the 49%. Let's actually get some more flood resilient structures. Thank you.
good points. Anybody else, Scott? It's a complicated discussion to have, I assure you.
It's hard.
Roger.
Yes.
Maybe one thing to say, I think it is worth distinguishing between commercial and residential, because the commercial side, the comments I get from folks that have businesses in town is that they're stuck to that half. They want to invest more into the building than they can right now. They're very sophisticated. They know exactly the risk they're taking. They know exactly what could go wrong. And having a non-compliant structure, even though they're spending what they would like to do is more than half, which again, for those smaller commercial structures, which a lot of our businesses are smaller.
Yeah.
But I think there's a different level of sophistication of those commercial structure purchasers down the road.
Right.
So I think it's worthwhile to maybe differentiate those and maybe explore different standards for those too, because we don't have as much concerns about the people coming in and saying, "Oh, I had no idea." It's much more sophisticated buyer.
And generally we do. The difference between the freeboard requirements for a residential property versus freeboard for a non-residential
Yes,
commercial.
A residential freeboard is 3 feet above base flood elevation. For non-residential, it's 1 foot.
1 foot.
And commercial does have the option. to not elevate, but dry
Like to
floodproof.
floodproof, right? Yeah.
And notice I'm not talking about freeboard this go around, right? Because I do think, I think that what, I mean, I will, but I think that there are just, this was a very, felt like in the middle, the 3 foot freeboard, I'm looking at one down in the back of my house, the 1 foot, like that's an issue that I understand staff can't get behind, and I understand why. But there are little things that can help both the commercial and the residential folks in the floodplain, and this was just kind of one of those other little tweaks, like I said.
Yeah, and that's another thing that's subject to some change. ASCE just released their new ASCE 24-24 document, which dictates what plugs into the international building codes and the international residential code, and they're recommending in there a switch to a 2 foot freeboard for residential, so that may go up.
And FEMA's
Of
at 1.
Of course, Nashville's at 4 feet.
Yeah,
And
you're high.
It's
Yeah.
been there since 1979, and nobody talks to us about lowering our freeboard. And I get comments. I go to national floodplain conferences, and people ask me every year, how did Nashville manage to get a 4 foot freeboard established? And so nobody was around during 1979, so nobody knows. But nobody's suggesting we need to change. So
I'm not either.
it's
Right now. No, I'm not either.
anyway, yeah.
It's a good thing.
The floodproofing is a good point for non-residential structures, because
Why just none? I mean, why can't we have that for residential too? I mean, I feel like if we're
we think it a bad idea for residentials to floodproof. Ultimately, floodproofing requires somebody to install some floodgates or install some sandbags, or if you have to tie it to the actions of a person, then it doesn't
well,
work.
no, but there's
for
floodproofing.
residential.
I'm thinking like elevating the HVAC. That's
Oh yeah.
what are you talking? What are you talking? When
No.
you say,
Floodproofing for a non-residential is a physical feature on the building itself.
Right.
Slide-in gates, things that if you knew a flood was imminent, you'd send your crew out, and they would all slide in the gates, and they clamp down, and they create watertight blockages across doorways and things like that.
what would you call flood vents in a residential structure? Would that be floodproofing? Flood vents?
That's
like
wet floodproofing.
wet floodproofing.
Yeah.
So I'm talking about adding wet floodproofing kind of requirements for residential if they hit certain levels.
Yeah, and while we would not call it a wet floodproofing for a residential property, but it provides protection to the structure. If you get too much water on the outside of a
Right.
crawl space, you're going to have structural
Yeah.
failures. And so flood vents prevent that from happening. They allow water to come in, and then as the water recedes,
Comes
the
out.
water flows back out.
Okay. So those are the kinds of things that.
Yeah.
Roger, you are the expert on this, and I appreciate you your dialogue on this.
Well,
and
I'm glad to talk
I'm
to
just
you
a
about it.
layperson.
I'll see Shanna this coming month. We'll be at the National Association of Floodplain Conference in New Orleans. It happens that over the course of years, I've been involved in a number of different components of that organization. There are 11,000 certified floodplain managers across the country, and I'm the president of the group that provides leadership to those 11,000 floodplain managers. So it's a position that I don't hold lightly.
Can I ask
So-
one more question? I appreciate it. One more question because we have a little bit of time. So, if this change is, and I hear what you're saying, that there's all these bad things that, in your opinion, could happen. CRS is meant to take the different things you can do in your ordinance, and it applies a points number. FEMA does this, so it's not just. So the freeboard, for instance, is a much higher number, which is one reason why if we did do that, if we did want to entertain that, it would lower our CRS score. Like FEMA has associated, or whoever does CRS, like the tweaks you do to your ordinance and the level of significance that that has on your community. And this one in particular seems like it's a very small nominal number. Is that right?
9 points.
9 points.
90
What is
90.
90? What is the freeboard change? I mean, that's like hundreds.
I want to say that it's like 600 and something.
600 points. So I also want the planning commission to hear that while there are pros and cons to this change, probably. No, there are, like anything. In the scheme of things, that FEMA, not just us sitting around here talking, FEMA has associated a very small number of points as really generally affecting your overall city's floodplain ordinances. Very small compared to what we have talked about in the past, which is lowering the freeboard requirement from 3 to 1 foot, which is FEMA's minimum, which I'm not asking to do that, which would be 600 points. So I did want the planning commission to know also there is a actual systematic numerical way to gauge the significance of this change, and it's in the CRS points.
Yes,
So-
and I would add, you mentioned lowering the threshold for certain things.
Yeah.
I cannot tell you, standing here tonight, what those points would be.
Sure.
But the CRS program does give points if we were to lower the 50% threshold down to 45 or 40
Right.
or whatever.
And that might be the
number.
balance too, honestly. You might do this in tandem with that kind of change for residential or something. And then that way you end up, because it's the maintenance. You see, and this is something I'd like for y'all to investigate that. Could there be a give on the lowering of the 50% for residential or commercial with this change that might, again, we want more structures coming into compliance, not just raising it, but other ways of compliance too.
Yes, we have our Tennessee conference at the end of July, and our ISO representative who does our audits for the CRS program has already said that he would like to sit down with us to discuss
Those
where
kind
he
of,
can see that
Cool.
we could get
Yeah.
some additional points.
it's great.
I've tried to put dibs on his time too. So, but it's important. It's important
is.
because he knows and he can tell. He knows our programs, and he can tell us what we can do to improve that. I can advance one more level in Nashville to a level 7 if I do a bunch more stuff. But then I hit a roadblock because the city of Nashville doesn't do BSEGs, which has to do with the ISO, building codes, things like that. I can't control what my codes department does, so they don't do BSEG, so I can't go beyond a level 7.
Interesting.
Knoxville has gone all the way to level 6, not by doing more things, but by documenting the things that they already were doing. And so they are to be commended for that.
Do we do BSEG
Yes, we do. We get points
for that?
for that. Mhm.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. I think this is a great conversation to keep having. More floodplain resilient structures being the goal, and an ordinance that people will comply more with.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Okay, Commissioner Williamson?
Yeah, I just have, this might be kind of a naive question, but when houses are sold, is there any reason why they don't require disclosure that it's in the floodplain? Because I know.
They do.
That is
They already do.
That is a topic of national discussion.
Well, I know it's on the maps, but like, say, I don't
Yeah.
know, young,
It's,
don't
you
know
know,
what you're
it's
doing,
it's
and then
easy
the real,
to find
real
if
estate
you know what you're
agent
looking for.
doesn't-
Yeah,
It's actually it's super easy to find, and I can look it up in about 3
Yeah.
seconds. But like as far as the salespeople,
yeah, from a sales perspective, if a property
They
owner,
disclose that.
if a property owner is an investor and he's never occupied the structure, one of the last blanks and lines that he signs on the end of the disclosure form it says exactly that. I've never occupied this structure, so I have no knowledge as to whether it's ever flooded before or whatever. And
I see.
that's just criminal.
Yeah, it is.
so then the residential, say that you're an individual homeowner, and you sold a house, and then just the new people just don't bother to to read their documents or?
Probably not.
Okay.
It's closed.
Yeah,
Their
mortgage.
homework, they will require you to have flood insurance paid up a year in advance at closing.
Right.
Okay, so then if you
Cash
to get a
buyers.
mortgage on it, then it would probably come up in that discussion.
Definitely.
But if you're a cash
If the flood
buyer-
maps change, you'll get a letter from your mortgage company within
Okay,
a
so then if
within
you're the
a period
cash
of months.
buyer,
Yeah,
then it's kind of on
Yeah.
you to look up what you're doing,
right,
or ignorance of
yeah.
their salesperson. Okay.
So we had 1,800 homes in the floodplain?
1,800?
in
1,800?
Williamson
Yeah,
County?
they're about, mhm.
So with
Yeah.
the new appropriations for communication, you said a lot of people are not coming in, so this will allow more people to get information. You
There's a
feel like-
lot of communication we can do, and I would 100% support that in the budget. I think it's staff time too is a big part of that. Is it's a add-on to a lot of things that's just extra. But I think the BNS and Eric and Vernon are, I think, looking at other ways we can do that. Probably why we're meeting with the CRS is to find out what actually things we can communicate on. There's just basic things that we can communicate, like you said. I mean, just the people who occupy it now, letting them know, insurance education, all kinds of things.
Yeah.
These little things about flood, anything. We should be proactively doing that. Those are the kinds of things that are going to result in more flood resilient structures, not kind of ordinances that don't get used or citizens aren't aware of. Trust me, this guy didn't know he had to get a flood permit to paint his commercial building.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Shannon.
Thank you.
Any final questions or? Okay. Thank you, Kelly. All right, that wraps up our agenda. So we will be.